start with a story. You probably know this story.
Right, you have another one. Another person entering. Tamara.
Great. Anyway, so I'm going to start. Welcome, Tamara. I'm going to start with a story. And you're probably familiar with this story. It's The Mad Tea Party by Lewis Carroll. So get out a picture this scene here. There's a table set out under a tree in front of a house, and the March Hare and the Hatter are having tea at it. A dormouse is sitting between them, fast asleep, and the two of them are resting. They're using this poor dormouse as a cushion, resting their elbows on it and talking over his head. The table is a large one, but the three are all crowded together in one corner of it. No room, they cry out when Alice approaches the table. And Alice looks at it and says, there's plenty of room. And she's very indignant about it. And she sits down in a large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, the March Hare says in an encouraging tone. Alice looks all around the table, but she sees nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. Well, there isn't any, said the March Hare. Well, then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it, says Alice angrily. It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, says the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table, said Alice. It's laid for a great many more. Your hair wants cutting, the Hatter says, and he'd been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this is the first time he spoke. You should learn not to make personal remarks, Alice said with some severity. It's very rude. The Hatter ignores her, scolding, and responds with a riddle. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Alice attempts to answer the riddle, which begins a big argument about semantics. After the argument, the tea party sits in silence until the Mad Hatter asks the March Hare the time. And when he discovers that the March Hare's watch, which only measures the day of the month, is broken, the Mad Hatter becomes angry. He blames the March Hare for getting crumbs on the watch when the March Hare was spreading butter on it. The March Hare sullenly dips his watch in the tea, dejectedly remarking, it was the best butter. Alice gives up on the riddle and becomes angry when the Mad Hatter, which he discovers he doesn't know the answer either. She tells him he should not waste time asking riddles that have no answer. And the Mad Hatter calmly explains that time is a him. It is not an it. He goes on to recount how time had been upset ever since the Queen of Hearts said the Mad Hatter was murdering time when he performed a song badly. Since then, time has stayed fixed on 6 o'clock, which means they exist in a perpetual tea party. Bored with the line of conversation, the March Hare states that he would like to hear a story. So they wake up the Dormouse. Confused by the story, Alice interjects with so many questions that the Dormouse becomes insulted. Alice continues to ask questions until the Mad Hatter insults her, and she storms off in disgust. As she walks away, she looks back at the Mad Hatter and the March Hare as they attempt to stuff the Dormouse into the teapot. Thus ends the chapter of the Mad Tea Party. What a topsy-turvy world that Wonderland is. Nothing is as it seems, and everything means something more than it appears. The tea party sounds like it could be any number of our conversations that we have. within the energy of disconnection and anger. However, in this world of energies, the swirling disconnect invites a connect. And in fact, there is the work of a womanist, ethicist, and theological scholar, and her name is Dr. Marcia Riggs. And she says that the energies of the world always have those two elements. One element that's very peaceful. It's the circle. It's the circle of moral. It's the culture of moral courage, but we'll get to that. So in this circle is shalom, is in one sense, those ancient systems that we see in nature. I mean, behind Sharon, you can see it. There is this kind of energy in the world that is not disconnected. It is totally connected. As we look out, we kind of see it. So you've got this one world of shalom, of well-being, of wholeness, of nature. Some might call it God. And then you've got this other one, which is a world of violence, of disconnect. And in the middle, you can make this symbol yourself. Make two fingers, and then overlap them. And in that overlap, that is where beloved community can exist. Now, Marcia Riggs says that this is the culture of deception, and this is the culture of moral courage. And she's saying that anytime we walk into a room, we have to understand that we are walking into that overlap. And in that overlap, we have the opportunity to be an ombudsman for reconciliation. She also says that in one sense, we all, I know it's really easy to like look at somebody else and go, yeah, culture for deception right there, right? No problem. And actually just having, for me, having those terms, the idea that there's a culture of deception, when you are listening to people who are participating actively in that culture of deception, you understand that that's a culture of deception, right? But we can also understand that culture of deception like exists, and it exists not for people who are just in the extreme. You got the culture of deception, you've got the culture of moral courage. Does not just exist in the extreme. And in fact, we all kind of participate in both of those things. So she says that beloved community is the place of that overlap. And that's where we can practice the potential of beloved community. Here's how she explains beloved community. Beloved community is a metaphor that resonates with many political activists and persons of faith who engaged in the civil rights movement, and consequently, it has power to invoke in us a desire for justice and love. In the quest for radical justice, it has functioned as an ideal that we can work to achieve. She also says that in the quest for racial justice, it has functioned that we think that the society has to become colorblind. But she says that interpretation is not going to breed or create the world that we want to see. The world that we want to see has much more to do with pluralism, allowing the other person to be who they are, not making everyone the same. right? And pluralism is actually, understanding that our society is actually stronger when we can allow these differences, and that we can be focused on trying to act in that place that does not disconnect from people. So we have to understand that there is always this tension between wholeness and, in one sense, violence. That in that we've got a circle of moral courage, and we have a circle of the culture of deception. I mean, one of the things, I'm sure you can relate to this, one of the things that the people love about toddlers is they just kind of like, they just kind of say what they say. They're not saying it to be mean, though. They're not saying it to get power over people. They're kind of noticing, oh, he's grumpy. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it doesn't have a purpose, but besides like naming our own, like in one sense, perception, right? But we name that perception without judgment. So in our excerpt about the Mad Tea Party, we're immediately introduced into a conflict. The March Hare and the Hatter declare there's no room at the table for Alice. And Alice, seeing the empty chairs, proclaims there's plenty of room. And then, Alice lectures the Mad Hatter about offering her wine when there isn't any. And then the Mad Hatter, says, well, it wasn't very, it's not civil of you to sit down. So the question becomes, how do we be in relationship here? How can we be in relationship here? And do we see pluralism and diversity as either or a different interpretation of the situation? What do we see as normative, and how firm are we in insisting that our way of seeing it is the way that it is? Right. So interestingly enough, when I was looking at this, kind of doing a little tiny bit of research about the Mad Hatter, about that particular chapter, I came across this website of someone who works as a business analyst, right? And so in this business analyst thing, he was using the Mad Hatter's Tea Party as a metaphor, obviously, about what you could learn being a business analyst in that situation, right? And so he says he had four things to say. He said, confrontation is unproductive, right? And then the other thing he said, remain curious, right? And the third one was, don't say no to a story. It's somebody's story, and it's up for you to say no to their story, in one sense. And the fourth one is, nothing is personal in Wonderland. Right. So those are some hints. Like, how do you maneuver in that overlap of the tension? Understand that confrontation is not productive. Remain curious. Oh, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. Don't say no to a story. Oh, that's not right. That's not what happened. I mean, you can see that in your own life. You have an argument with somebody and they say, this is what happened. You go, that's not what happened. So don't say no to a story, and understand that nothing's actually personal. That when people are pushing back, they're really much more telling you about themselves than they are telling you about you. So let's leave our story there. I want to talk about a different tea party. So let's imagine a tea party with a toddler, a pretend tea party. Do you argue with the toddler that there's actually no tea? No, certainly not. In that situation, you hold the teacup, take a little sip, you go, ooh, that's really good tea. Can I have some more? You keep that conversation and that reality going. You participate with that toddler. And so if we take this a little tiny bit further, if I had asked you to kind of move into like kind of beloved community and kind of pluralism, just putting it in this other place, right? If I had asked each one of you to bring a teacup, you would not be surprised that none of the teacups matched, right? In fact, you wouldn't even expect it. Because I'm taking a teacup from, I mean, none of my teacups in my house even match anyway, but, we would each have something different. We would each bring something different. And in one sense, that's a little bit of an opening for us to think about beloved community. We've got no problem with the plurality of teacups. And we actually don't have any problem with like plurality when it comes to tea ceremonies, right? So many cultures have so many different tea ceremonies. When I was I went to Turkey on a pilgrimage when I was in seminary to to look at the intersections between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And in the Turkish tradition, they always start everything with a glass, actually, of tea. It's a glass, and it's thin and about this high. And the younger people in the circle who's ever gathered always serves an elder tea. It's just what they do. And in Japanese tea services, it's very different. And the English have tea at 4 o'clock, as we heard, or 6 o'clock, as we heard in the Mad Hatter story. So there is a thoughtfulness and an openness that we can start to develop so that we can function in that place where we always are, where wholeness and connection to things outside of our control, but like with nature, is intersecting with this violence, culture of deception, moral courage. How do we do that? And to that end, Marcia Riggs says there are 3 things that we can do. Beloved community comes into being as we encounter one another in a quest for authentic moral community. Like we are our best selves. We are open. We engage one another courageously, not judgmentally. We engage from a committed, but not absolutist ethical position. We nurture moral imagination. Nurturing moral imagination means embracing narratives about our experience and metaphors for what is good, right, responsible, and liberating as a basis of moral reason. It's interesting. I had a friend who got married a woman from Costa Rica. And we went down to Costa Rica and we stayed for a week. And it was very interesting, very, very different culture in Costa Rica. So one of the things when you're there for a whole week, they had planned, that we would go on a little bus tour around the island. So time was 11 o'clock. So we arrived at 11 o'clock. And the bus left, I think, at 1. Because there were people who weren't there. Now, for some people, that's, waiting till everybody's there is really not part of the culture, right? 11 o'clock, we're leaving, we're just doing that. But it's very interesting because I do weddings sometimes. And one of the things that and they say, okay, this wedding's going to start at 4 o'clock. And I always ask the question, is there an important person who is coming from far away that we will need to wait for? And, they either say yes or they say no. But in that situation, we can actually move aside our more Western idea right? That, wedding's gonna start at 4, it's gonna start at 4. Well, if grandma's sitting in traffic, you're not starting that wedding till she gets there. It's not a hard leap. It's just different. Right? So that's kind of, that's that moral imagination, right? You're weighing out, like, are you, is it important that you start on time? Or is it important that all your important people be there? Right? And how do you lay that out in your own, not absolutist, right? She's saying, this is not hard and fast. In this particular situation, it's kind of like, what is the best situation for all of the different elements that you have that you're weighing out in the midst of walking into a room that's going to have both peace and tension in it. So, and one time I when I was in seminary in the Bay Area, it's very interesting because the Bay Area is a very exciting kind of place in that anybody who's kind of going on tour is going to stop like in the Bay Area. So Marshall Rosenberg, the man who had made kind of popular nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is listening to somebody's needs and kind of responding to their need, not necessarily countering an argument. Well, this was 2006 and the Iraqi war had not only was there a huge flood, but there was a war. And anyway, so I raised my hand and asked Marshall. I said, so there are people that I know who say things like, oh, we should just bomb the Iraqis back into the Stone Age. Done. I said, I have to talk to them about their need. He said, if you want to talk to them. It's kind of like, I need to find out, oh, well, why do you say that? I mean, it was fear, right? Just annihilate them and it relieves the fear. But so you need to be like kind of dealing with people kind of from what is actually not the specific of what they're talking about, but the why. Why is it important to them to kind of hold that position? So, and Marcia does say that in order to be able to kind of, some of the tools that she suggests, it is being curious. It is learning about nonviolent communication. How do you like make that connection? So that's basically my message, right? We've got this amazing thing, like in Wonderland, where nothing was real. And it really is kind of how our world is right this instant. It's a very fluid, very confrontational, very like, nobody is talking to each other. And at the same time, we understand that we find ourselves in this place that asks for our own moral courage. And we can think about like metaphors, like a child's tea party, or the fact that if I each asked you to bring something, that was personal to you, you would not bring the same things. And you would not judge each other, particularly about what you brought. I used to do the Upper Delaware River Roundtable. It was just we would make a big square because they were rectangular tables. And people would come on the first Thursday of the month, every other month. And what we would do, the whole point of the roundtable was just to communicate with each other. So there were people that were, like across the river, like the planning person from like Sullivan County and the planning person from Wayne County or Pike County, different representatives of different groups. And the only thing, we didn't form an organization. We didn't come up with bylaws. We didn't come up with mission statements particularly. We just were communicating to enhance the future of the Upper Delaware. And actually, because we were able to do that, we were chosen by the Pinchot Institute that was doing a big report on Marcellus Shale. And so we had around that table gas like company representatives, anti-fracking people, the planners, the doctors, all the very, very wide, diverse stakeholders. And sometimes I had to stand up and go, no, let's just stop. Nobody, the whole premise of this is that nobody needed to give up their perspective. They had to offer their perspective as a gift to the group. You can't bludgeon people with your perspective, but you can offer your perspective with a sense of moral courage, with a sense of being non-judgmental, with a sense that it's not personal what they're saying or what you're saying to them, that it exists in this place where we've got connection and disconnection. And the one thing I think everyone is that disconnection doesn't work. So I hope in the week ahead that when you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to assert your own, I know I do this, you need to assert your own. I want to remember that what the business analyst said, confrontation is not tough. Be curious. It's not. And seek moral. So as is our tradition, we open the floor for any comments or reactions.
I think what you said today is really something that most of us, if we stand back and just kind of get out of it, it's not personal business. That is really tough for me. We can go forward in a way that is meaningful and letting the other person take a breath, because when you're act somebody and you're making all these statements about how you feel and how you feel, you're not really getting much input from them. So in my case, in most cases, especially in this political climate, is to just ask the question, why do you feel that way? How did you come about that particular feeling that you have? And let them just go and not comment. And sometimes they're stunned because they expect you to come back with a but. And when there isn't a but, you just let it lie. And my hope is that in doing that, they see somebody who has a different take on what they are feeling, because the way we are, seems that we're polarized in this particular political environment now is we just go to our own corners. And that is, we just reflect what everybody else around us that we choose to be in our corner does. And we can't find out what the other person is thinking, let alone appreciate that maybe they have some points. And maybe we have to give up some points if you're going to go, in that realm. So that really struck me. Thank you.
Diplomacy. Diplomacy.
It's the latest word.
Civility.
Sharon, did you want to say something?
Yeah, everything you were saying, it's very interesting. I don't quite know what year it was that whoever it was who developed the deep canvassing method uses all these strategies to be curious, to elicit from the person, making really no comments and only prompting with something personal of yours, not a personal opinion, but something that's personally affected you, so that they will then say yes or no, or this is, so everything is, and quite honestly, when I first saw it, I liked the idea of it. And my daughter wanted to know how I could do it because she knows I talk about it. I never shut up. But I said, well, if you know what your mission is, and your mission is actually to elicit from them their feelings and let them begin to think about what they really think about, give them permission to think about how they came to that conclusion. It's a lot better. And I think everyone that I know that talks about storytelling says you can't change a mind by giving them information, but if you tell them a story that they can relate to, they begin to think about that, and that may change some minds. A good story, like you've told, gets people to think and think about how they think about things. So when I'm out, I'm just always amazed at how quickly, once you start asking, do you ever think about voting personally? Who would you vote? How would you do that? Who do you love enough that you can think about how some particular vote might help them? And then they start thinking about their kids or their grandmother, and all of a sudden you are like, you're deep in their life. They are giving you the whole 9 yards. They will talk and talk and talk, especially if you don't. And when I was in real estate, they said the last person who talks loses. So the best thing to do is don't talk and let them do the talking. It's very useful. But thanks, Laurie. Yes, it's good information for people to know.
I'm not gonna be the last person who talks. I'll lose. Anyone else wanna have any last comment?
Tamara, you have any comment?
Hi, yes, this is Tamara. Thank you. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful meeting this morning. And I'm so sorry I was a little bit late, so I hope it wasn't too disruptive. But what a wonderful story to keep in mind with Alice in Wonderland. This is the first time I've heard this way of conveying this, and it really puts you out of it encourages us to be in a different space, right? To be connected in ourselves and to be available for others. And personally was very supportive of me. I'm dealing with a very how should I say it? Kind of a hostile family member, and I love them dearly, and I'm trying to care for them. I am caring for them, not trying, and it just it's just supporting me in how I have been interacting with them. So thank you so much for this reminder. Really beautiful, really beautiful. Thank you so much, Laurie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I have a class that started at 11, so I have to get going to that seminar, but thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Welcome, Tamara.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming. Okay.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to be in a circle is because of this last song. And you may or may not be familiar with it. It's by I'm forgetting, it's by Libby Roderick. And it's like, how can anyone ever tell you that you're anything less than beautiful? How can anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle. How deeply you're connected to my soul. Now try that with me. How can anyone ever tell you that you're anything less than beautiful? How can anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. We're gonna change that to me. How can anyone ever tell me that I'm anything less than beautiful? How can anyone ever tell me I am less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that my loving is a miracle? How deeply I'm connected to my soul. Last time we're gonna use us. How can anyone ever tell us that we're anything less than beautiful? How can anyone ever tell us we are less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that our loving is a miracle? How deeply we're connected to our soul. Our closing words are by Rumi, called Insanity. I have lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know the reasons, knocking on the door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. All right, we will extinguish our chalice. Nina, would you do us the honor of blowing out the candle? Sure. All right, I'm gonna read these words and then you're gonna blow out the candle. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and make manifest in our days until we are together again. Yay! Anyway, refreshment time. Thank you, Sharon. Nice to see you.
Watch out for the chairs, they have a line of their own.
Yeah, the two.
Yeah, they're very comfortable, but it's like unusual. I never sat in the chair.
You know, I wanted to have like a roller derby with these chairs. I think it would be very fun.
Okay,
Anyway, I made some zucchini muffins. You can see what's growing in my garden. And there's some fruit and coffee. And thank you.